Welcome. Let me get to know you all a little bit first. Educator, raise your hand, please. Educator in a special ed classroom. Educator not in a special ed classroom. Educator, administrator in some way, shape, or form. Sort of. Meaning you have the title, but you really don't want to do the job. Got it. Parent. Parent of kid who's been restrained or secluded. Other concerned party who hasn't had a chance to raise their hand yet. That's our all-inclusive category, so I don't have to keep running through what everybody could be. Glad to have you here. Glad to be here. This is, of course, a very important issue everywhere. Washington State is getting there, believe it or not, slightly ahead of the curve compared to some other places, but you're not there yet. So here's the deal. Legislation is one way to do it, and knowing what to do instead is another way to do it. They often go hand in hand. It is nice to have legislation compelling people to figure out what to do instead, but you can figure out what to do instead even without legislation compelling it. I prefer when it's compelled, but, because that's the push, but it's good that Washington State is getting going on knowing what to do instead, even in the absence of past legislation. So, I'm biased, of course, but I think collaborative and proactive solutions is a very, very good answer to what to do instead. Certainly has the track record for it. It's evidence-based. It's trauma-informed. The last thing you want to be doing is re-traumatizing the already traumatized. But the real burning question that we will be answering, but that we should be thinking about even as we get started here is, since nobody wants to restrain or seclude a kid, why do we find ourselves in situations in which people feel that may be necessary so often? That is truly the question that we have to answer. Nobody wants to do it. Contrary to popular belief, restraint and seclusion do not improve safety. Why do we find ourselves in situations in the heat of the moment where we are feeling the need to lay hands on kids as often as we do? You answer that question, you can start doing something about it. And we will be answering that question over the course of these 2 days. So let me give you the rundown. A lot of people like to know when the breaks are going to be. That's like first order of business. We're going to go in about 1.5 hour segments. So break number 1 will be at approximately 10:15 Pacific time. I'm an Easterner. I will say there aren't very many places in the world that I think are as pretty as where I live in Maine. But this is one of them. This is beautiful. Maine is beautiful. We don't need to compare. I was going to say this place is almost as beautiful as Maine, but it's actually every bit as beautiful as Maine. But we don't have to rank, right? So break number 1 will be at around 10:15. Break number 2, lunch, will be at 12-ish. Don't hold me to these, but I'll stick to them as close as I can. Officially, you have an hour for lunch. Yesterday and the day before in Yakima, even with restaurants very nearby, an hour wasn't enough. So we're going to give you an hour and a quarter. We'll be back at 1:15 Pacific time. We'll do a few hour and a quarter segments, then we're done at 3:30. And we are not finishing before 3:30, I promise. We got too much to cover. What I'm going to do today is run through the entire model. Want to give you the 10,000-foot view. Tomorrow we will get into more of the nuances of the model. Good? It's interesting. The questions on both days are going to be different. On let's get through the whole model in one day, there are questions related to how this model is different and similar to others. There are questions about the four-letter word that plagues all new initiatives in schools these days, and for good reason, T-I-M-E, time. So there's more sort of, how does this fit with what we're currently doing? Questions on day one. I'll give you the quick answer. It may not. And that's okay. Because what we're currently doing is why we are finding ourselves in the heat of the moment feeling the need to lay hands on kids. I'm not going to feel bad if we stop doing what we're currently doing. That's contributing to part of the mess that we're in. If we're going to fix it, sometimes you got to do something about how you're doing things now. This may not fit perfectly. It doesn't fit perfectly into a lot of existing practices. Now, just to reassure you, in no way at any point over these 2 days should you feel like I'm telling you you're doing something wrong. Just because I'm sometimes looking with a critical eye at existing practices doesn't mean you're being blamed. You inherited them. And in fact, you were trained in them. A big part of why we find ourselves in the heat of the moment, feeling the need to lay hands on kids, is not only because of our existing structures and practices, but also because of how we were trained. But I'm not being critical. I'm not being judgmental. I'm not saying you're not doing a good job with a lot of the kids that you work with. A chair has suddenly appeared. I'm unlikely to sit in it. I think adults do well if they can too. So if we're going to help do something about this, we may need some different training. We are definitely going to need a new set of lenses. We're going to need new practices. We're going to need new timing. Are we ready? Let me just say a few things about our cover slide here. The name of the model. Who's familiar with the model already? Oh, good. Who doesn't know, who has no idea what you've gotten yourself into today? Okay. Good that you're here. The name of the model tells you a lot about what you're doing when you are implementing this model. And in some ways, it's actually rather straightforward. You are collaborating with kids proactively on solving the problems that are affecting their lives. How hard can that be? We're going to spend the entire day tomorrow going through the nuances of how hard it can be. Because in certain ways, it's very simple. And in other ways, in more nuanced ways, it's not so simple. But I'm going to change what I just said for kids with concerning behaviors, the ones we are restraining and secluding. So let me just change it up slightly. The beginning's the same, the ending is different. We're going to be collaborating with kids proactively, so far it's the same, on solving the problems, still the same, that are causing their concerning behaviors. That was different. And we have just arrived at the first pivotal part of the day. Yes, it is problems that are causing kids' concerning behaviors. And in this model, we call them unsolved problems, also known, by the way, as problems that have yet to be solved. Also known, by the way, as problems that are waiting to be solved. And many of those unsolved problems are very old. And I'm not talking about the chronological age of the kid. I'm talking about how long that kid's been having difficulty meeting that expectation. By the way, we've arrived at our first synonyms of the day. Unsolved problem, unmet expectation are the same. Any expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting reliably is an unsolved problem. Good? That's what you're doing in this model. I should mention, and I'll be saying this multiple times over the course of these 2 days. This is the first time I'm saying it. Solved problems don't cause concerning behaviors. Only unsolved problems do. All right, let's take a look at our subtitle. Moving from power and control to collaboration and problem solving. Why would you want to do that? I can think of a few reasons. Reason number one, the kids who are on the receiving end of power and control methodologies the most tend to be the ones who benefit from them the least. That's why they're on the receiving end of them the most. They're not working. But to tell you the truth, I wouldn't want to use power and control with any kid as the methodology for solving problems. Much better to be teaching every kid how to solve problems collaboratively. That is a much more critical real-world skill. Finally, a quick word about the graphic. It depicts a journey. I promise. It's the best graphic I can find depicting a journey, at least one that suits my purposes. Notice, this is a journey, and because it is different from what we are currently doing, it's not going to be a straight line. It's kind of going to be like driving through the pass that I drove through last night from Yakima, right? It's curvy, it's bumpy. There's going to be bumps. Now, I'll say this about bumps. While we love things to go smoothly, I gotta say, in this model, in one respect, bumps are good. Bumps tell you you missed something. Bumps tell you you got more work to do. I got no problem with bumps. I love things going smoothly. I got no problem with bumps. Finally, the only misleading thing about this slide is the sunlight at the end of the journey. And that's because I think there's sunlight at every point along the journey when you're implementing this model, not just at the end. All right. If we're going to take this journey together, we're going to need some anchors to get us there. Some key themes. For some of you, paradigm shifts. And that's what we're going to cover next. The 5 key themes of the CPS model. For some of you, they will be paradigm shifting. And that's okay. If we want to stop restraining and secluding kids, we're going to have to change our lenses, practices, timing. But before we get to our key themes, I want to give you a bit of an agenda here. Some of the important things that we're going to be covering. And there's a good reason that expectation management is number one. Expectation management is actually one of the keys to ending the use of restraint and seclusion. Why is that? Because it is when we are placing expectations on kids that we already know they can't reliably meet, that they exhibit the concerning behaviors that cause us, in certain circumstances, to feel that we need to lay hands on them. You'll be hearing about expectation management a lot today. I fervently believe that if we were managing our expectations well, we wouldn't have to manage behavior almost ever. Isn't this interesting? Everybody talks about behavior management. I'd much rather talk about expectation management. You put expectations on a kid that they're having difficulty meeting. Certain kids are going to exhibit behaviors that cause us to feel the need to lay hands on. If you don't put those expectations on those kids, or if you solve those problems, the kid is not going to exhibit those concerning behaviors. You are not going to need to lay hands on. Believe it or not, in some respects, it's that simple. Another thing we're going to be talking about, the key themes, you know that's coming next. There are two key mantras of this model. I'll be telling you other mantras as we go along, but the two that I hope you remember the most are, don't be late. One of the things that drives me the most nuts these days is how much time and money we spend teaching people what to do when it's already becoming or already late. If you teach people what to do when it's late, they're going to be late. A lot. Don't be late. Key mantra number 2, ask the kid. This is an ask the kid model. Ask the kid is what comes out of my mouth whenever I'm sitting in a meeting and caregivers are sitting around hypothesizing about either how this kid got to be this way, which, let's face it, is one of our favorite topics, right? We love talking about that. You cannot answer that question with any level of precision, but we love trying. Or hypothesizing about why the kid is having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. Whenever I'm sitting in those meetings, I would say that my tolerance for that kind of discussion is about 7.5 seconds, at which point I ask, have y'all asked the kid yet? First of all, don't ask the kid how they got to be that way. They can't answer that question any better than we do. But they can answer the question, what's making it hard for you to meet this expectation? That they can answer. I just saved you a lot of TIME time. By the way, this goes back to our training. Think about how much time we spend thinking we know what's getting in the way of a kid meeting a particular expectation, applying interventions based on what we think. The problem is we're wrong a lot. The other problem is we don't think we're wrong a lot, but we spend a lot of time applying interventions based on what we think is going on with the kid without really knowing what's going on with the kid, which is why I tell people with great confidence, I'm not worried about TIME time. This model is going to save you a lot of TIME time. And I promise to point out to you over the course of today just the pockets of time you're going to be saving. All right, if you wake up at 2 o'clock this morning, you're having trouble sleeping, maybe you're wrestling with what you learned today, there's only 2 things I would like to have bouncing around in your head. Don't be late. Ask the kid. We good? You're going to be hearing about the collaborative and proactive solutions model over the entire 2 days. We should spend a little time talking, unless you want to spend a lot of time talking, about what we do with kids, students, who are not stable enough at this moment to meet almost any expectations. They exist. The worst thing you could do with those kids who are, here's your mantra, stabilization comes before education. And yet, because educators educate, sometimes we are trying to educate even before the kid is stable enough to benefit from what we're trying to do. That's poor form. That's not good care. So we should spend a little time thinking about what does that look like in the students that we are saying, you know what? We are removing every expectation except coming to school. Some kids were even removing that, but that's not as common. We want this kid here. We are in stabilization mode. Not forever, but for now. And then last on our agenda, in those kids in particular, communication with the folks at home is going to be critical, and medication management is going to be critical. Here's what's interesting. A lot of the special ed programs that I work with, one of the things I tell them is, you know, in some ways, y'all are kind of running an inpatient unit here. I mean, number one, your kids in your program are in and out of inpatient units anyhow. Same kids, but the inpatient unit has a lot of advantages you don't have. Maybe we can help you have some of those advantages, with medication management being high on the list. You want to know what the kid's on. You want to know that the kid is actually on what the kid is on. You want to know that there was no change over the weekend. You need to know. You're with the kid the next 6 hours. I think you want to know. Right? All right. So there's some of our agenda. Let's start with our key themes. And we'll repeat how to log in. I won't remember. But as we're about to break, if one of you can raise your hand and say, can you repeat the login information again? We'll do it. Cool? Key theme number 1. These are huge. These are game changers. These put us on a completely different playing field. Many of us, me included, were trained to primarily focus on the concerning behaviors of kids who are prone to concerning behaviors. And we were trained in some rather straightforward strategies on how to modify those behaviors. And by the way, in your slides, you have my slides. So you don't have to write down anything that's on the slide, anything in additional, feel free. Actually, you should feel free to write down what's on the slide too. Far be it from me to tell you what to write down. I'm just letting you know the slides have everything on the slides in them. Cool? That's not what you're doing in this model. In this model, you're not focused on the kid's concerning behavior and you're not focused on modifying it. You are instead focused on the problems that are causing that behavior and solving them. In this model, you are a problem solver, not a behavior modifier. This is big because in a lot of the classrooms in which restraint and seclusion are still being used, they are also still using a behavior modification program in which they are incentivizing appropriate behavior. And by the way, just in case you are thinking that the punishment form of consequences is the only form of consequence that can cause concerning behavior, think again. The failure to achieve an anticipated reward can just as easily cause concerning behavior. So that's not what you're doing in this model. Now, the first question I get when I start covering this theme is, how is the kid's behavior going to improve if we're not busy modifying it? Well, there's lots of ways to improve a kid's behavior besides modifying it. And what the research tells us about the evidence-based model you're hearing about today is that when you are solving problems collaboratively and proactively, the kid's behavior is going to improve every bit as much as it would have if all you were busy doing was modifying their behavior. But, and this is a very big but, if all we're busy doing is modifying the kid's concerning behavior, the problems that are causing that behavior remain unsolved. So when people say to me, Ross, don't you know that behavior modification strategies are evidence-based? I say, yes, I know that very well. That was my original training. CPS is evidence-based as well, but here's what I say next. It's not enough. It's not nearly enough, and it never was enough to modify a kid's behavior if the problems that are causing that behavior remain. unsolved. It's not enough. When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you're doing both. It's a 2-for-1 sale. You are not only it's actually a 5-for-1 sale, but we're not there yet. You are not only solving the problems that are causing the kids' concerning behavior, you are dramatically reducing the concerning behavior. And that's because of what the behavior is, which we're about to cover. Before we cover what behavior is, what concerning behavior is, let's think about what kind of unsolved problems we're talking about. And I'm just going to stick with school unsolved problems here. Here's a sampling of expectations students routinely have difficulty meeting that can cause concerning behavior in the case of kids who are prone to concerning behavior. Difficulty coming back into the classroom after recess. Difficulty agreeing with Billy on the rules of the Foursquare game at recess. Difficulty getting along with Trevor on the school bus in the morning. Difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math. Difficulty sitting next to Susie during circle time. Difficulty coming to school. Difficulty coming to school on time. Just a sampling. All have the potential to cause concerning behavior in kids who are prone to concerning behavior if the kids are having difficulty meeting those expectations. Just a sampling. Now let's think about behavior briefly, because you already know behavior is not your primary focal point in this model. Behavior is the primary focal point of other models, definitely models that have the word behavior in the title. Behavior is not your primary focus in this model. So what is concerning behavior in this model? Simply the frustration response, the stress response. Some people might like to call it the trauma response, but not every kid with concerning behavior has a trauma history, so I wouldn't tend to use that globally. More synonyms. It's the signal. It's the fever. Most importantly, it's the way the kid is communicating. We've all heard the cliche. All behavior is communication. What is concerning behavior communicating? That there is an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. Period. End of story. What behaviors count as concerning? We're not that picky. Any behavior that communicates that the kid is having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. Now, we could, if we wanted to, but we don't, categorize concerning behaviors. So just as an example, we could use the categories that have been given to us by the trauma literature: fight, flight, and freeze. That's fine. A lot of kids do all three. But more importantly, you still don't have the most important information you need to be helping this kid. There's still information missing. If we wanted to rely on the mother lode of categories of behavior, we would turn our attention to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, where we would find dozens of categories of behavior. Well, that's right. Take a look at the diagnostic criteria for the vast majority of childhood psychiatric disorders. And what will you find? A long list of concerning behaviors. I have categories of my own. They're fake. I'm one of the few people who's willing to acknowledge that his categories are fake, but I use them for a very important reason. My two categories are lucky and unlucky. Bear with me. This is actually real, but fake. What are lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? Sampling, whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations lucky? Those ways aren't going to get you popped into timeout. Not going to get you held in from recess. Not going to get you held after school. Not going to get you a detention, suspension, expulsion. Not going to get you hit. Hit? Well, still very popular in many American families, but also still popular in the public schools of 17 different states here in the year 2024. Now, it was 19 about a year ago, but Colorado and Idaho recently passed legislation banning corporal punishment in their schools. There are 17 more to go. We are hitting kids on the butt at school with a piece of wood to accomplish something, God knows what, close to 100,000 times every school year. And as always, we are doing that disproportionately to kids with disabilities and those with black and brown skin. Those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations aren't going to get you, here's why we're here today, pinned to the ground by 2 to 4 adults, what's known as a restraint, thrown into a locked or blocked closet-sized room, what's known as a seclusion, not going to get you arrested at school, but best of all, those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are highly likely to elicit empathy, nurturance, support from your caregivers. Lucky you, kid. Not so for the unlucky variety. That's the variety of kid I've been working with for, in one way or another, for over 40 years now. What are unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? You already know. Here's a sampling. Screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running. Just a sampling. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations unlucky? Those ways are more likely to get you popped into timeout, held in from recess, held after school, detention, suspension, expulsion, hit, pinned, thrown, arrested. But worst of all, those unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are far less likely to elicit empathy, nurturance, support from your caregivers, even though the field of developmental psychopathology has been telling us for a very long time that whether your frustration response is lucky or unlucky, it is communicating the exact same thing. There's an expectation you're having difficulty meeting. The things we still do to kids here in the year 2024, by mere virtue of the fact that they're communicating that they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations in ways that are unlucky, is unconscionable and unnecessary and very counterproductive. And some of you know this already. That's why I and the nonprofit that I founded, Lives in the Balance, produced the award-winning, you don't know that beforehand, documentary film, The Kids We Lose. It streams right off of the Lives in the Balance website. I'll give you a tour of the website at some point over the next 2 days. I get the feeling some of you have already taken a tour of the website. The Kids We Lose. Brutal to watch. Some people have a very hard time getting through it. If you have a trauma history or have a kid who has a trauma history, you may decide to take a pass on watching The Kids We Lose because it depicts in very graphic detail what we're still doing to kids because they're unlucky. All right, a few little cleaning up points. Notice I've been saying unmet expectations, not unmet needs. Does that mean I don't believe in unmet needs? No, I do believe in unmet needs. I think we all have unmet needs. I think that unmet expectations tend to be more precise and often more actionable. Now, there are unmet needs that are actionable. If a kid is food deprived, that is an unmet need that we can take action on. But I find that in a lot of instances, The unmet needs that we're talking about are more hypothetical, more nebulous, more ambiguous, more subject to adult interpretation, and often things we can't do anything about. I don't want to talk about things we can't do anything about. I'd rather talk about the things we'll talk about this more later. I'd rather talk about the things about which we can do something, than the things about which we can do nothing, right? I've also heard it said that you really can't, I don't know where this comes from, you can't start solving a problem with a kid, start solving problems with a kid until all of their needs are met. I don't know anybody who I've ever met who all of their needs were being met. So apparently that counts us all out. Don't not solve problems with a kid because you don't think all of their needs have been met. That's kind of tying both hands behind your back. Am I making sense? One more little tidbit is it's still an unsolved problem even if it's not accompanied by concerning behavior. Yes, of course. Remember, an unsolved problem is as any expectation a kid is having difficulty reliably meeting, whether it's accompanied by concerning behavior or not. The concerning behavior is what causes people to lay hands on the kid, but lots of kids have unsolved problems without the concerning behavior to accompany it. We might say that they have much smaller frustration responses. And the kids I've been working with for over 40 years now have big frustration responses. I was on a Zoom call this morning with some folks who I work with, and their kid is quite explosive. And I was saying to them, you got a great kid there. You also have a very smart kid. I've seen the numbers. This is a smart kid. He doesn't look so smart when he's losing his mind. I said to them, the things that we are doing now are aimed at trying to reduce his emotional response to problems, because he has, we all use this term, he has big emotions. And big emotions make it hard for people to think. I said, I have no doubt that your kid is going to be able to solve problems. He's already talking the talk. Even in the midst of frustration these days, he's starting to say, we need a solution. Incredible, right? Because that's not what he's been saying. He's been saying much more colorful things than that. We've got to see if we can lower the intensity of the emotional response so that your kid can think. And if we can help your kid think, the two are going to go beautifully hand in hand. That's what this model's about. All right, finally, if we are going to make this massive shift from focusing on behavior and modifying it to focusing on the problems that are causing that behavior and solving them, we are going to need different assessment methodology, because you know what primarily gets assessed in schools, but also everywhere else, when a kid is communicating that they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations through their concerning behavior, we assess their concerning behavior. We do behavior checklists, we do behavior observations, we do a functional behavior assessment, all so that we can come up with something known as a behavior plan, all focused on the frustration response, all focused on the signal, the fever, often not focused anywhere nearly enough on the unsolved problems that are causing that behavior. Some of you know this already. In this model, we use an instrument formerly known as the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, but as of about a week ago, now known as the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. It was the ALSUP, now it's the ASUP. People want to know how to pronounce it. It's ASUP. People wanted to know, should it be ASUP or ASUP? I prefer ASUP. ASUP, good? The rest is up to you. I say ASUP. I say, never mind. It's going to give you the information that's been missing. What skills are making it hard for this kid to respond adaptively to problems and frustrations? What are this kid's unsolved problems? All of that tends to get lost. It doesn't even get thought about when all we're focused on are the concerning behaviors. Am I making sense? That's key theme number one. Paradigm shifting component number one. Let's pause there for a second. Any questions about paradigm shifting component number one? Go ahead. All right. So I'm going to try to repeat your question because we have people watching streaming by Zoom. That's okay. So your question is what I'm talking about related to skill deficits. I try not to use the word deficit. It's why we took the word lagging out of the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. And the neurodivergent community has been among the most vocal in telling us all that deficits and lagging often have a neurotypical reference point. And I don't know anybody who's all that enthusiastic about being told that they're lagging anything. So I'm a little careful with my terminology, which I'm very careful about my terminology in general terms these days. In fact, I was also working on the Lives in the Balance newsletter this morning, and I was about to put something in, and I said, you know, you should look that up. See if anybody has a problem with that being said, right? I'm just careful these days. I don't want to offend anybody. I certainly don't want people not to hear what we have to say because of the way that we said it. Here's how I'm going to answer your question. Skills is used in a lot of different ways these days. A lot of board-certified behavior analysts say they're teaching skills. When you dig a little deeper into what they're talking about, they're actually usually talking about behavioral skills. And when you dig a little deeper, what you find that they're talking about is behavior, which they are teaching and reteaching. That's not the kind of skills we're talking about in this model. Right. You'll see what kind of skills we're talking about in the next 15 minutes. Cool? I'm talking about cognitive skills. I'm not talking about behavioral skills. Behavioral skills means behavior. Isn't that interesting? If somebody says the word skills, you got to find out what they mean, because a lot of folks using skills these days are talking about behaviors with skills right after the word. That's not what we're talking about. Good? Okay. Any other questions before we keep going? By the way, there's only one rule for you all. Don't be shy. If you have questions, comments, reactions, please. Otherwise, here's what happens. I end up talking at you all day, which is not that much fun. So, please ask. Good? Paradigm shifting component number two. Now that we are solving problems with kids, we got to think about what kind of problem solvers we want to be. Us adults tend to be real keen on problem solving of the unilateral kind. And by the way, that is not only adult instinct for many people, it is also the way a lot of people were trained. This is where the adult decides what's getting in the way for the kid. After all, we were trained. We know, right? And the adult decides what's going to be done about it. After all, we were trained. We know what to do about it. That's not this model. In this model, we operate on a very important recognition. You want to solve a problem with a kid? You're going to need a teammate. You're going to need a partner. Who's your partner? The kid. And by the way, generally speaking, that kid is going to be delighted to help you out. That kid has been wondering for a very long time, how come us adults keep trying to make things better without the kid's input, without the kid's involvement, without the kid's ideas, without the kid's sign-off? This is problem solving of the collaborative kind. It's something you're doing with the kid, not to the kid. And it is where the ask the kid mantra starts coming through loud and clear. Now, what questions tend to pop up when I start talking about collaborating with kids on solving problems? These are the two most common. What if the kid is non-speaking? Good question. What if the kid won't talk to you? Oh, very good question. You mean reluctant participants? Reluctant participants are among my favorites. Nothing thrills me more than having caregivers tell me that the kid is unlikely to talk to me. It is one of my biggest thrills in life. Driving through the pass was pretty cool too. But this was big thrill, right? Please tell me the kid's not going to talk to me. Then we'll see what happens, right? I find that reluctant participants will participate, especially once we stop talking with them about their concerning behavior, which simply causes them to think they're in trouble, become defensive, and stop talking, and start talking with them about things they've been struggling with for a very long time. I found not only do they talk, we have difficulty getting them to stop. And people solve problems collaboratively with non-speaking kids in one way or another all the time. As we always say, it's not that the kid's not communicating. All human beings communicate. Is that the kid's not communicating through our preferred modality, the spoken word. But in one way or another, those are your key words, we can engage every kid in one way or another in the process of solving the problems that are affecting their lives. We'll talk about them, depending on how fast I go today, either this afternoon or tomorrow. Cool? Talk about all these kids at some point. Now, a few other questions that, another question that tends to pop up is, how are you going to hold, I'll finish this and I'll take a question. How are we going to hold the kid accountable if we're not using consequences? I have always found that to be a fascinating question, because I got to tell you, I've never found consequences to be a particularly effective way to hold a kid accountable. I've always been fascinated that consequences and accountability have always been used almost synonymously. When you're using consequences, adult-imposed consequences, the kid is the passive recipient of your solutions, your consequences, no thinking, no engagement. How is that accountability? You want to hold a kid accountable? Engage them in the process of solving the problems that are causing their concerning behaviors. That's accountability. Question. I'm not making it personal. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of ways to help kids communicate, and that the creativity sky is the limit on what that can look like, and that there's always a way. Always a way. Sometimes it's hard to figure it out for a particular kid. You'll be getting a sampling of ways from me. It always helps me to know the kid so I can get a feel for how we're going to help this kid communicate. But all kids communicate. It's not through our preferred modality some of the time, but all kids communicate. However they're communicating now can often be used to help them communicate about the things we would like them to be communicating about. But we will get into that much later. Good? Here's the four-letter word. The minute I start talking about collaborating with kids on solving problems, understandably, many educators ask the question, when does he think we're going to do this? Excellent question. With 50,000 teaching vacancies post-COVID and more concerning behaviors than ever, time is even shorter than it was pre-COVID. And by the way, I don't blame COVID for anything. I just tell people COVID laid bare stuff that was already a mess before COVID hit. COVID didn't make it better, but I'm not sure COVID caused anything. Time is short. We help every building figure out when they're going to carve out time to solve problems collaboratively and proactively with their students. It can be done. Just one example, right off the cuff here. A principal who we work with, who's now in her third school, not because she's been fired, but because she keeps climbing the ladder, often the first thing she does when she starts at a new school is she rearranges the schedule so that every classroom teacher has 20 minutes a day to solve problems with a kid. That is her first move. Her staff love it. They know there are problems that need to be solved. They just need us to answer the question, how are we going to make sure you have the time to do it? And that's not the only way. We'll be talking more about other ways as we go along here. See, the issue is I can't cover everything in 5 minutes. Kind of takes me the whole day. So all of these answers are coming. Any questions about key theme number 2? We good? Are y'all awake yet? See, I'm at 12:30 p.m. already. I'm wide awake. This one's big, and we're going to be here a while. Paradigm shifting component number 3. Now that we are solving problems with kids, and now that we are solving them collaboratively, we're going to have to think about our timing. As you all know, a great deal of the intervention that takes place for kids with concerning behaviors in schools, but also everywhere else, takes place in the heat of the moment, emergently, reactively. Terrible timing. Get this, unnecessary timing. Not this model. 99.9% of what you're doing in this model is planned, proactive. Now here come the big questions. Oh, by the way, this is where our don't be late theme comes in. 99.9% of what you're doing in this model is planned and proactive. How can that be? When we never know when the kid's going to get upset. We never know when the kid's going to struggle. The kid is so unpredictable. Oh, here are the answers. The kid is not unpredictable. You know exactly when the kid's going to get upset, exactly when the kid's going to struggle, if you answer 2 questions right up front. And those 2 questions are why and when. The very 2 questions answered by the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. As in, why do some kids respond so poorly to problems and frustrations? Why is this specific kid responding so poorly to problems and frustrations? When do kids exhibit concerning behavior? We've actually already answered that one. When is this specific kid exhibiting concerning behaviors? The answer to question number 1 has been provided to us by the research that has accumulated over the last 40 to 50 years on kids with concerning behaviors. And we've learned a lot about kids with concerning behaviors over the last 40 to 50 years, but I'm about to put into 1 sentence the most critical finding. Why do some kids respond so poorly to problems and frustrations? Because they're struggling with the skills that are involved in responding adaptively to problems and frustrations. What skills are those? I don't have room for them on this slide, as you can see, but they come up on a slide in a few slides. Flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. The global skills kids with concerning behaviors have been found to be struggling with. Notice the word is skills. The word is not motivation. Do you know that there is not a single study? This surprises people. Do you know that there's not a single study telling us that kids who have difficulty responding adaptively to problems and frustrations are poorly motivated? That study doesn't exist, which should cause us to ponder, why we've been so busy trying to incentivize them to behave appropriately when poor motivation isn't what's even going on here. No, this is about skills. Thank goodness. The assessment of skills and unsolved problems is going to help us figure out what those skills are for each individual kid. And then for each individual kid, we will have the right lenses on. Skills, not motivation. Huge. That is just massive. When do kids exhibit concerning behavior? When they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations. Thank goodness the assessment of skills and unsolved problems is going to help us figure out what this kid's unsolved problems are, because then we'll know what expectations this kid's having difficulty meeting, and then we'll know exactly what problems need to be solved so that this kid doesn't exhibit concerning behaviors in response to them anymore. Once you identify the skills, once you identify the unsolved problems, this is a very predictable kid. And intervention can be almost exclusively proactive. And since, as the next slide shows you, restraint and seclusion happen very late in the sequence, if you aren't late, you are highly unlikely to use those procedures. Here we go, one of my favorite slides. We're going to get you out of the heat of the moment, because don't be late is one of our 2 mantras. This is the sequence of restraint and seclusion. It's also, by the way, the sequence of all punitive, exclusionary, disciplinary procedures. What you're seeing on the screen here are 5 bubbles in a declining sequence that's actually symbolic. The colors of the bubbles are meaningful. In blue, everything that's early, true crisis prevention. In red, everything that's late, crisis management. You don't want to be late, you want to be early. You don't want to be in crisis management mode, you want to be in crisis prevention mode. Made more confusing by the fact that there are models that call themselves crisis prevention that are really about crisis management. Well, that'll muddy the waters. What you're going to be spending the next 2 days learning about is what's going on in the blue bubble. The blue bubble is your life for the next 2 days. What's going on in the blue bubble? The blue bubble is where we are proactively identifying the expectations the kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. What are this kid's unsolved problems? And we are doing one of 2 things with those unsolved problems. We are solving some of them collaboratively and proactively, and some of them, we're going to be talking about this a lot more later, we are putting on hold, at least for now. That's called expectation management. Either because, you'll be learning all about this later, we have bigger fish to fry, or because we don't think this expectation's even in range for this kid at this point in this kid's development. I'm not talking about all 4th graders. I'm talking about this kid. That's the blue bubble. It's proactive. It's true crisis prevention. And if that's what we were doing in most of the places where kids with concerning behaviors end up, and of course that's everywhere, there would be almost no need for detention, suspension, expulsion, restraint, seclusion. The fact that those things are still fairly popular tells us that the blue bubble is not what we're still mostly doing in many places. So what are we mostly doing? What is the prototypical adult first response to a kid who's having difficulty reliably meeting an expectation? Red bubble number 1, push harder. Insist harder. Founded, I guess, on the belief that pushing kids harder to meet expectations we already know they cannot reliably meet elicits better performance. I got to tell you, that hasn't been my experience. My experience is that if you push, especially the kids I work with, you push them harder to meet expectations you already know they cannot reliably meet, you are not going to elicit better performance. You are going to elicit red bubble number 2, concerning behavior that communicates to us something we already knew. The kid is having difficulty reliably meeting that expectation. We knew that. I should backtrack just slightly here, since we're talking about education settings here. Education settings have interesting forms of pushing harder. They are done with the best of intentions. They are done with the outstanding desire, outstanding not being sarcastic, to ensure that no kid is deprived of educational opportunities. Here's what we're doing these days. We've decided that because we don't want to deprive any kid of educational opportunities, and we don't. Historically, there are kids we've deprived of educational opportunities. We do not want to do that anymore. But what we decided to do is to make sure that every kid is at grade level somehow. What? What if they're not at grade level? Well, we'll do this. We got this. We'll strategize. We'll support. We'll adapt. We'll accommodate. We'll find the right entry points, but by God, that kid's going to be at grade level. Interesting approach. See, I've always thought that making sure that we didn't deprive any kid of educational opportunities was defined as meeting every kid where they're at. And if we have some arbitrary bar that we've set that's intended, good intentions, let there be no doubt, that are intended to make sure we're not depriving anybody of educational opportunities, but are actually setting a lot of kids off, isn't this interesting? No, some kids are not ready to be ready. Some kids are not at grade level yet. I don't care how you support, adapt, accommodate, find the right entry. You can do all that stuff. You put expectations on a kid that you already know they can't meet, you're going to get red bubble number 2, concerning behavior. Am I making sense here? The definition of good educating is meeting every kid where they're at. If you're meeting every kid where they're at, you are not depriving anybody of any educational opportunities. All right. I promise to get to your question in a minute. If the kids, oh, by the way, I need to make a very important point. Notice the behavior is late. The unsolved problem that caused the behavior already happened. The concerning behavior is late. And interventions that are focused on concerning behavior are interventions that are focused on what's late. Don't be late. What's the definition of consequences? An event that occurs after the fact. Let me paraphrase. An event that is late. Isn't this interesting? If the kid's concerning behavior is of the unlucky kind, what are we going to conclude next? Based on our crisis prevention, but really crisis management training, we are going to conclude that the kid is becoming escalated. And we've been trained to watch for the very early warning signs of escalation. But the early warning signs of escalation are really late, because look at all that's happened before the early warning signs of escalation. And then what are we going to do? Based on our crisis prevention, but really crisis management training, we're going to de-escalate the kid. You are now very late. And because you are now very late, there's some chance your de-escalation efforts are not going to work. What do you do next? Well, that's where red bubble number 4 comes in. That's where you lay hands on the kid. that's where you decide to restrain or seclude the kid. Founded on the belief, we've already dismissed this, but let's come back to it, that restraining and secluding kids keeps us and them safer. No data. In fact, the data that I'm aware of, there's a very interesting 26-year study of restraint and seclusion that just came out. It's on the Lives in the Balance website. I'll show you where you can find it when I give you the tour. 70-something deaths while being restrained. 30 kids in the last 26 years. Doesn't sound safer to me. So the data point me in a very different direction. Anecdotal experience points me in a different direction. I promise I haven't forgotten your question. Just got to get this out of my system. Yes, 44 years ago, you would have found me restraining and secluding kids on an inpatient psychiatry unit in Miami, Florida. How enthusiastic was I about it? Not that enthusiastic. Mostly because I'm only 5'6", and the kids were usually bigger than me. Plus, they had something I didn't have, psychotic energy. But this is all I was trained to do. I was trained that when, oh, there's the magic word. There's the word that almost causes me to break out in hives. When. What does when tell you? You're late. When a kid's, I hate when questions. Here's what those sound like. What should I do when? What should you do when? Why are we even asking that question? I mean, I guess it's good to know what to do when, but it's a whole lot better to know what to do so you don't find yourself when. That's 99% of training. Actually, it's not. 99% of the training that we are providing to a lot of people who work with our most challenging kids is teaching them what to do when. It is sickening. Truly. You would have found me on an inpatient psychiatry unit sitting on top of kids because all I was trained to do is that when kids who were usually bigger than me spun out of control, I was trying to do one of two things. Sit on them or somehow get them into the proverbial locked, padded room. While I was sitting on them, I was trained, me and 2 or 3 other big people. Early on, I was always praying that there were big people on my shift. Eventually, when things started making sense to me, I was hoping that there were small people like me on my shift. Anyways, we'd sit on top of the kid, and I was trained to whisper in the kid's ear. Here's what I was trained to whisper. If you don't calm down, you're going to get a shot. Can you believe it? Back then, it was either Haldol or Thorazine. I'm not sure what they would use these days. But this was one of the, I'm not making light of this, this was actually one of my first formative experiences in mental health. This was pre-grad school, right? The first thing I noticed was, no matter how well I whispered into the kid's ear, if you don't calm down, you're going to get a shot. And I said it as good as I could, right? Softly, calmingly, right? Soothingly. No one calmed down. They all got the shot. Good to know. Good to know that this is not a calming strategy. Here's formative experience number 2. I'd leave for the day, dust myself off, thinking I had done my job for the day. I'd walk in for my shift the next day, and every single unsolved problem, I wasn't calling them that then, every single unsolved problem that caused the kid to go off the day before was still there waiting for me when I showed up for my shift the next day. Why? Because sitting on kids and throwing them into padded rooms does not solve any problems. Neither do detentions, suspensions, expulsions, hitting, de-escalating. Those are not problem-solving strategies. Am I making sense? Boy, do I like this graphic. It tells the tale. Don't be late. Let me take this question back here first because she's been waiting a very long time. So I think you're talking about a very specific situation, but I'm going to still paraphrase your question. But I don't know if you'll like my paraphrase, but here goes. When is it too late to start doing the right thing? Never. Are there any kids who are what we might call, I don't know if I like this, I'll say it anyways. There are no kids, no kid that I've ever worked with hadn't already experienced things that didn't work. That's every kid that I've ever worked with. Those are the kids who are still giving us trouble. The reason they're still giving us trouble is because what we did didn't work. So it's never too late to start doing the right thing. That's my quick answer. Do staff need to be trained? A lot of the answers to your questions were in your question. Do we have to retrain people? Yeah. Is that going to take a super long time? No. Is it good to stop training them in what we don't want them doing anymore? Yes, that would be a very good first step, but they're still going to need to know what to do instead. See, this is the interesting thing about legislation. It tells us what we're not allowed to do. You still have to fill in with what people should be doing instead. So I like legislation. I just know that the filling in part is even more important. And I want the legislation to pass. We can start filling in before the legislation passes, as you've already heard, right? It's never too late to start doing the right thing. That's the answer. Is that going to mean retraining some folks? Yeah. Is it going to be that hard? It's not that hard. This is going to sound crazy. I don't find it that hard to help people stop restraining and secluding kids. There are things I do as a professional that are harder than that, right? That's not the hardest thing. It's not. And one of the first things you have to decide is we don't want to do that anymore. Because what I frequently heard said is, we need these tools. The kids are very tough. Interesting. The Denver, Colorado public school system doesn't use seclusion, and their kids are as tough as yours. How do they do that? There's many schools that don't restrain and seclude kids that have kids who are equally tough. How do they do it? So the first thing we have to decide is we don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to keep saying that because the kids are tough, these are tools we need. No, it's great to say we don't want to use them. We only use them when we have to. You don't want to have to. So there's things that need to be filled in so you don't have to. That's it. Staff need to be retrained. That's it. And every kid who I've ever worked with had endured more adult-imposed consequences than most of us will experience in a lifetime. Good. Let's start turning this around now. That's the only answer. Question. Well, so the question is how, and we're a little ahead here, so we are going to cover this. So I don't want you to feel like I'm giving you short shrift now. How do we change, your global question is, not specific to you, how do we change systems so that they stop doing what we know isn't working and start doing what we know will work? That's your big question. I promise we will be answering that question as we go along. There's one over here that I don't want to. Of course you were. Let me paraphrase your question. Yes, we are in the midst of redefining crisis prevention because we've been sold a bill of goods. We've been taught to believe that crisis management is crisis prevention. It's not. And that's why you are in a crisis so often, right? If you think that de-escalation is a problem-solving strategy, you and I would have a very interesting discussion about that. I'm sure you don't think that, right? So here's what ends up happening. Unless we are in the blue bubble, we are way down there a lot, we are solving nothing. Okay, now let's think about this. We're doing a lot of things that aren't working. We're responding to a lot of crises. It's a little bit hard to fathom how we get out of crisis mode. A school system that I work with, this is many school systems, have people, designated people, the word crisis is in their job title, right? Are you kidding me? Right? So we're basically guaranteeing that not only are those people going to only show up in a crisis, but that others are going to rely on them to deal with the crisis, right? What a setup. Also, we're primarily focused on behavior, late, because consequences also set kids off, late. Then we've got our crisis manager to jump in, de-escalate, nothing gets solved, and we're wondering why we have no time. Look at all the time we are wasting. Look at all the noise. If crisis isn't in your job title, I would like to put problem solving in your job title so you can show up way beforehand and keep from having to show up when it's already late. And for everybody who's counting on you to show up when it's already late, to come to the recognition that that is about the worst possible setup. It guarantees crisis. Fascinating. Crisis prevention is way over here. What people have been told to believe is crisis prevention is very late and is therefore crisis management. Go ahead. Let's not make the rock bigger than it needs to be. You've gone societal on me. I'm with you all the way, but I'm talking about this school, this classroom. That's not as big of a rock. If I'm trying to change society, and let there be no doubt, I'm trying to do that too. It's a bigger rock, right? One school system, not as big of a rock. We're not asking, truth is, we're making their job way easier. So it's a rock worth pushing. The lens shift is actually, in my experience, believe it or not the hardest part. Changing structures, dealing with the inertia, dealing with structures that continue to point us toward old ways of doing things, that's the harder part. It's not that big of a rock. Society, big rock, right? And the big rock there is also that as we are in transition from late to early, we still need some late for the ones we weren't early enough for to begin with. So that's it at a societal level, right? In Maine, CPS, this model, helped them go from 250 kids in juvenile detention to 40. There are people who want to get rid of juvenile detention in Maine, and I'm one of them, right? But those 40, we don't really have a great place for those 40. 210, we had a good place for, right? We reduced recidivism from 85% to 15%. Quite the accomplishment, but notice it wasn't zero. It was still 15%, right? So we're not quite there yet because those 40 were in process already. And by the way, we're still not being early enough anyways. So you get my drift, right? Yes, early is better than late. Sometimes we're in process. There's still going to be a need for late. Sure. What are the, I think now is not a bad time to do it, although, yeah, why not? I'm on no stopwatch. We'll break at 10:15, wherever we are. A lot of people say that there are going to be more arrests at school and other things that we don't want to have happen if we get rid of restraint and seclusion. That's them still thinking we're going to have a lot of crises. That's not how I'm thinking. They're not in crisis prevention mode still. They're just thinking about how we replace one crisis management strategy with other crisis management strategies. Wrong way of thinking about it, right? But that also comes from us thinking, well, these are our crisis management strategies. If we can't use these, we need others. No, you need to start preventing crises so you don't need anything, which sounds a little far-fetched to some folks under their current circumstances. I get it, but isn't that far-fetched? So we're not talking about replacing one crisis management strategies with others. We're talking about truly preventing crises. the question is, there's sort of two in there. How do we help staff appreciate the need to prioritize? The failure to prioritize is why they're solving nothing. We can help them learn about that. And I'll be talking more about this later. You'll get more ammo later. But the second is a comment that I hear frequently, and that is, so we have no more expectations? Who said that? Right? You can't run a classroom without having expectations, but isn't that fascinating that we're talking about prioritizing and all of a sudden people think that we are removing every single expectation, right? That's kind of black and white thinking, right? Nobody said that. We have to make that clear to them. No. You still have expectations. The ones we're removing are, you can't, but you also can't solve everything at once. That's the key line. You can't, it took a lot. The reason this kid is in your classroom is because the people who had the kid before you didn't identify or solve these problems. Now that you, and by the way, they were always there. So the fact that you've identified them doesn't mean you've just invented them. They were there all along. It's just that you finally identified them. Well done. But now you've got 40 or 50. You can't solve 40 or 50 problems in a week. It's all progress is incremental. So, yeah, if the kid throws a pencil on the floor, that probably isn't going to be one of your top priorities, right? Maybe you'll get to that in 3 months. We'll find out. You might actually decide in the midst, on the way there, whatever, compared to other frustration responses this kid exhibits, throwing a pencil on the floor, I'll take it. Shall we keep going? Let's cover one more, because I want to just make sure, and then we'll keep going. Well, go ahead. What could another job be besides crisis manager? What a horrible job. I don't want that job, right? I've already done that with big kids on inpatient units. Behavior intervention specialist, problem solving specialist. But here's the deal. I want everybody in the building to be a problem solving specialist. I don't want that to be a designated position, right? So I don't think we need that position. I'm not trying to put anybody out of a job, but we don't need that job, right? We don't need somebody who show up in a crisis. It's completely the wrong setup, right? And irrespective of what we call people, we want everybody in this building to know how to identify problems proactively and solve them collaboratively and proactively. A lot of these job titles are archaic and late. A more accurate job description, a more accurate job title would be late specialist. Oh yeah, I show up when it's late. I'm very good at late. I do late. Let's cover one more. Oh, this takes a while. I don't know if I can do this in 5 minutes. That means we've got two options. Take a break in 10 or break now. All right, we're going to go democracy here, which, as you all know, only guarantees that many of you will be very unhappy. But the majority of you will be slightly happier. Who wants to take a break now? Interesting. This is going to be a very close vote. Guaranteeing a lot of unhappy people. Who wants to take a break in 10 minutes after I cover this last slide about being late? This is close. Let's leave this up to the Supreme Court. I've decided we're going to go 10 more minutes. Good? I want to just get through late, then we'll keep going. I love this slide. Many people find this slide to be the most annoying slide in my deck. This is my non-exhaustive list of late. Things we do with the best of intentions, often without even recognizing that they're late. Ready? This doesn't take 10 minutes. I don't know how long it takes. Let's start with one that we don't care that much about. Asking for help. We are putting a lot of effort into getting kids to ask for help these days. We think it's a very important self-advocacy skill. And by the way, I agree. It is good to know how to ask for help. The only problem I have with it, and it's not that big of a problem, it just eases us into ones that I care much more deeply about, is that asking for help is late. By the time the kid is asking for help, There's already a problem that they're struggling with. The problem comes first, asking for help comes second. Wouldn't this all be much more efficient if instead of putting all kinds of effort into getting kids to ask for help, which once again, a good self-advocacy skill, I'm not arguing that, if instead we help kids anticipate, identify, and solve problems before they have to ask for help for them in the first place? Yes, asking for help is late. I don't care that much about that one. This one I care a lot about. Thanks to PBIS and Responsive Classroom, we are giving kids a lot of breaks these days when they are beginning to struggle with a particular task. Taking a break is late. I'm not talking about planned breaks. Work for 10 minutes, take a break for 2, work for 10 minutes, take a break for 2. I'm talking about the breaks we give kids just as they are beginning to struggle. Taking a break is late. And taking a break doesn't solve any of the problems that are causing the kid to need a break in the first place. And that explains why I have worked with kids who were getting 20, 30 breaks a day. 20 to 30 breaks on Monday simply guarantees 20 to 30 breaks on Tuesday, because I'm repeating myself just to be annoying. Taking a break is late, and taking a break doesn't solve any of the problems that are causing the kid to need a break in the first place. Taking a break is not a problem-solving strategy. Calming corners. Late. When does a kid access the calming corner? When they're not calm. When are they not calm? When they're having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. Calming corners are late. And calming corners do not solve a single problem that's causing the kid to access the calming corner in the first place. Which explains why I've worked with kids who are getting 15 to 20 calming corners a day. 15 to 20 calming corners on Thursday simply guarantees 15 to 20 calming corners on Friday. And now you know why. Calming corners are late. Now the one that is most annoying, until people hear me out. I'm going to skip, I'll skip, I'm not going to skip call the parent. Call the parent. Do I think homeschool communication is a good thing? I do. Do I think mostly calling parents when their kid exhibits a concerning behavior at school is a good thing? Not really. Here's why. Number one, the parent wasn't there. Number two, the expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting that caused the concerning behavior is an unsolved problem of school. It occurs on your watch. It's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting at school. What do you think the parent is able to do to solve a problem that is occurring off of their watch? And be very careful. I know that, and I have 2 kids, 26 and 23 years old now. I didn't get called very much. But when I did get called, even this is saying a lot, even I felt the need to prove to the folks at school that I was capable of a very muscular response, right? Even me had to talk myself off the cliff, right? But if that's me, we got to be very careful with this call the parent stuff. You don't know what they're going to do. And furthermore, how can they possibly solve a problem that is occurring on the school's watch? I don't think they can. This is the one that annoys people. Coping strategies. You heard me say, don't forget that I said this as I keep going. Coping strategies, good. You heard me, right? The coping strategies we're teaching kids a lot of the time, not as good. I think we're spending a lot of time and energy teaching kids what to do when it's already late. So not only are we late, we're teaching kids to be late. We teach them to take deep breaths. We teach them to count to 10. We teach them to figure out what color they are. Red, yellow, green, blue, late, 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 late. Wouldn't this be a whole lot more efficient and a whole lot more effective if we were teaching kids how to identify, anticipate, and solve problems before it was late in the first place. That should be 90% of what we're teaching kids. 10% should be how to handle frustration once you're already there. 90% should be how to solve problems so you don't get frustrated in the first place. Here's a good example. Two good examples. I speak in Australia and New Zealand frequently. When I was there in October, I started noticing, this past October, I'm there again in May, and then in October again, that maybe 1 out of every 5 people who were coming to my talks had satchels with them, bags filled with squishy toys and things they could sit on and fidget with. I'm thinking, now that's what I'm talking about, right? Why wait until you're having difficulty with something you know you're going to have difficulty with before you try to do something about it? During a time when you're very ill-positioned to do something about it, bring a bag. Here's anticipation in my life. I fly a lot. Therefore, I am at risk, I'd say this happens 1 out of every 5 times, for having a flight that I'm on be delayed, canceled. When do I start thinking about the possibility that the flight that I'm about to book myself on could be delayed or canceled? As I'm booking the flight. As I'm booking the flight, I'm looking for backup. If this flight doesn't get me there, how am I going to get there? Right? Because I got to get there. What am I not doing? I'm not waiting until the gate agent makes the announcement before I start thinking about my options, because that's lousy timing. Now emotions are going to make it harder for me to think. I'll still manage, but I don't have big emotions. I'll still manage, but it's late. Question? That's how most, so the question is, and whether it's PBIS or anything else, the question is, what about teaching skills outside the heat of the moment for what the kid should do inside the heat of the moment? Well, I get the concept. I don't think it works very well. I think that often what we teach outside the heat of the moment doesn't get deployed in the heat of the moment because it's a completely different scenario. I think that that's wishful thinking. That's what I think. I don't have a lot of success teaching kids how to deal with the heat of the moment outside the heat of the moment with great confidence that what I teach them outside the heat of the moment is going to help them in the heat of the moment. I just don't see it happening. And I'd be very interested to know what it is exactly that we're teaching them. And this is critical, whether we realistically think they can deploy it once they're already frustrated. That's where a lot of the pre-teaching falls apart. Pre-teaching's all well and good. I could tell you a true story, but I won't. I want to give you your break. The rest of these are self-evident. De-escalating, late. Restraint and seclusion, late. Discipline referrals, late. Detention, suspension, expulsion, paddling, late. Are you annoyed already? Don't be late. Let's come back in 15 minutes.